Emma hadn't expected anyone that morning. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that settled in when Daniel was away on his business trips. She moved through the routine of her day putting on a sweater, pouring herself a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the trees turning golden and red in the cool autumn air. Her thoughts felt heavy, her chest carrying the familiar weight of loneliness. When the doorbell rang, she nearly ignored it, assuming it was a delivery or perhaps a neighbor asking for help. But something in the sound drew her to the door. She pulled it open and froze. Standing there was Michael, Daniel's younger brother, his hands in his pockets and a smile playing across his face. She hadn't seen him in years. Not since the last family gathering where everyone had been rushing around the dining table and laughing loudly. Back then, Michael had been younger, lighter in spirit, almost carefree. Now, though, he looked grown, steady, and unexpectedly warm. The years had shaped him, and in that moment, Emma noticed it in a way that caught her off guard. "Emma," he said, his voice calm and filled with ease. "Thought I'd surprise you. I'm in town for a while." Her heart skipped without permission. For weeks, she had only known silence, long evenings of unanswered thoughts, and the sharp emptiness of a house missing its rhythm. Seeing him at the door felt like sunlight breaking through a gray morning. She stepped back, inviting him inside without hesitation, still trying to piece together her own feelings. Michael carried the same charm he had always had. But his presence felt different now. He wasn't just Daniel's younger brother standing awkwardly in the corner during family dinners. He was a man who had traveled, who had lived beyond the stories she'd heard secondhand. As he walked into the living room, Emma caught herself smiling for the first time in days. She realized how unusual it was, how quickly her mood had shifted just from his being there. They sat at the kitchen table, where sunlight spilled across the wood in thin stripes. Emma offered him coffee, and as the kettle whistled, their conversation began to flow. He told her about Boston, about work, about how much had changed since the last time they had spoken properly. His voice filled the room with an energy she hadn't known she was missing. She found herself leaning forward, listening closely, not out of politeness, but out of genuine interest. Michael had always been kind, but now he carried a quiet confidence, the kind that made his words feel more meaningful. Emma noticed the way he laughed at his own small stories, the way his eyes softened when he asked about her life, how she was managing, what she had been up to. No one had asked her those questions in such a genuine way in a long time. Daniel's calls from the road were short, often rushed, filled with updates and schedules rather than real conversations. Sitting here now, Emma felt seen. There was nothing romantic spoken, nothing direct, yet Emma felt something stir within her. She tried to ignore it, to focus only on the comfort of having company, of being reminded of family. But his smile kept echoing in her chest. It was the same smile she had seen when she first opened the door, warm enough to scatter the loneliness that had wrapped itself around her all week. As they spoke, Emma realized how much she had missed simple connection. The days had begun to blur, the walls of the house closing in without laughter or conversation. Michael's sudden arrival had broken that spell. He asked if she'd like to walk later, to catch some fresh air by the park nearby. She nodded before she could second guess, surprised at how much she wanted to. The morning drifted into afternoon as they kept talking, words carrying them from one memory to another. Emma noticed details she had never given much thought to before: the way his eyes caught the light, the way his gestures carried ease, how he listened more than he spoke. Each moment felt sharper, more vivid, as if the world had suddenly found color again. And yet, beneath the warmth of that unexpected reunion, Emma felt a quiet pull she couldn't name. This was Daniel's brother, family, and nothing more should ever exist between them. She reminded herself of that truth, steadying her thoughts. But when Michael leaned back in his chair, still smiling, still looking at her like she mattered, the reminder didn't silence the small, persistent beat of her heart. Emma hadn't realized how much she longed for that feeling: being seen, being understood, being reminded she wasn't invisible. The doorstep had been the beginning of it, the spark she hadn't known she needed. And as she looked at Michael across the table, she couldn't help but wonder if his smile had opened a door she wasn't ready to close. The afternoon light slipped gently through the curtains as Emma and Michael sat together. Coffee cups empty, conversations still alive. What had started as a simple catch-up now felt like something deeper. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, the sound surprising even her. Michael had a way of drawing out stories, of asking questions that made her feel important, as if her words carried weight. She didn't realize how much she had been craving that kind of attention until now. As the hours passed, Emma noticed small things about him she had overlooked in the past. His voice had grown steadier over the years, filled with thoughtfulness. The way he listened made her want to keep talking. When she mentioned her small struggles, like how the grocery bags felt heavier when Daniel was gone, Michael didn't brush them off. Instead, he offered to help, not out of duty but with genuine care. It was the kind of presence that made her feel less alone, less burdened. They decided to step outside for a walk before the sunset. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Emma wrapped her scarf tighter, while Michael walked beside her, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. The neighborhood streets were quiet, lined with trees painted gold and orange. For a while they walked in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt full, carrying an unspoken understanding. When Michael finally spoke, his words were soft but carried weight. "You know, Emma, I always admired how you keep this house feeling warm. Even when Daniel's busy, you manage everything so gracefully." His compliment caught her off guard. She felt her cheeks warm, unsure how to respond. She had heard kind words before, but this was different. It wasn't casual or empty, it was sincere. She smiled, murmuring a quiet thank you. But inside her chest, something stirred. An emotion she hadn't expected to feel, as they continued walking. Michael began sharing about his life in Boston, the challenges of work, the loneliness of living in a city where people rarely slowed down to connect. Emma listened, realizing they shared something in common, the quiet ache of isolation. Though their circumstances were different, the feeling was the same. And that connection, subtle as it was, made her feel closer to him. Back at the house, Emma invited him to stay for dinner. She hadn't planned on cooking anything special, but with Michael there, she felt motivated. Together, they moved around the kitchen, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and sharing light conversation. Their movements felt natural, almost too natural, as if they had been doing this for years. Every time their hands brushed while reaching for something, Emma felt a quick spark run through her. She reminded herself not to read too much into it, but the feeling was impossible to ignore as they sat down to eat. The atmosphere carried a warmth that the house had been missing. Michael teased her gently about her cooking, and Emma laughed, shaking her head at his playful tone. Yet beneath the humor, there was a softness in his eyes that made her heart race. It wasn't just family affection, it felt like something more. Though neither of them spoke it aloud. After dinner, they settled into the living room, the soft glow of the lamp filling the space. Emma brought out an old photo album she hadn't touched in years. Together, they flipped through pictures of family gatherings, vacations, and moments frozen in time. When they reached a picture of Emma and Daniel's wedding, Emma paused. She remembered how happy she had been that day, full of hope for the future. Looking at it now, she felt a wave of sadness mixed with gratitude. Michael glanced at the photo, then at Emma. His expression was thoughtful, almost unreadable. "You looked beautiful that day," he said quietly. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Emma felt her heart skip again, torn between the warmth of his kindness and the reality of who he was. For a moment, their eyes met and held. It wasn't planned and it wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. Emma felt something unspoken pass between them, a flicker of understanding that neither could put into words. She quickly looked away, trying to steady herself. But the memory of that gaze lingered. The evening stretched on, and soon it was time for Michael to leave. As he stood at the door, Emma felt an unexpected heaviness settle over her. She didn't want the day to end. His presence had filled the house with life again, and she wasn't ready to return to the silence. Michael smiled at her the same way he had that morning. A smile that felt like warmth on a cold day. "I'll stop by tomorrow if that's okay," he said. Emma nodded, her voice catching slightly as she replied, "I'd like that." As the door closed behind him, Emma leaned against it, her heart racing. The day had been simple: coffee, a walk, dinner, conversation. But to her it felt extraordinary. Something had shifted, something delicate and unspoken, yet powerful enough to change the way she saw him alone again. Emma replayed the moments in her mind: the walk, the laughter, the photo album, that lingering look. She tried to remind herself that Michael was Daniel's brother, that lines existed for a reason. But deep down, she knew her heart had already started to blur them, and it scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. The next few days passed quickly, each one bringing Michael and Emma closer in ways neither had planned. What began as casual visits soon turned into a quiet rhythm. Michael would knock on the door with groceries in hand or tools to fix something small around the house. Emma found herself waiting for those knocks, listening for them with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Every time he showed up, the loneliness she had been carrying seemed to fade, replaced by a feeling she couldn't quite name. One morning, Emma was struggling with a loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet. Daniel had promised to fix it months ago, but it had remained untouched. When Michael saw her fumbling with the screwdriver, he stepped in, gently taking it from her hand. "Let me," he said with a calm smile. She watched as he worked, his focus steady, his movements sure. The sound of the hinge clicking back into place was small, but to Emma, it meant everything. It wasn't just about fixing the cabinet, it was about someone noticing, someone caring enough to take action. Afterward, they sat at the table, a soft silence hanging between them. Emma wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small compared to the weight of her gratitude. Michael broke the silence with an easy laugh. "You know, I don't think I've spent this much time in one place in years. It feels good." His eyes met hers, and for a second, neither of them looked away. The connection was undeniable, but fragile, like a thread they were both afraid to pull. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the backyard in golden light, Emma and Michael stood side by side. The quiet stretched on until Michael spoke, his voice lower than usual. "Emma, I don't want to make things complicated, but being here with you, it feels different. I can't pretend I don't notice it." Her heart pounded at his words. She wanted to step back, to protect herself, but she couldn't move. His honesty mirrored the very thoughts she had been hiding from herself. She whispered, "Michael, we can't." But her voice trembled. He didn't reach for her, didn't move closer, yet the space between them felt charged. Emma turned her eyes to the horizon, trying to find calm in the fading light. She thought of Daniel, of the years they had built together, of the promises she had made. But she also thought of the silence that filled their marriage, the way her voice seemed to vanish when Daniel was near, the way she often felt invisible in her own home. Standing beside Michael, she felt the opposite scene, heard, understood. The conflict tore at her heart, leaving her caught between loyalty and longing. Michael spoke again, his tone gentle. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to hurt you. But I need you to know how I feel." His words were careful, deliberate, but they carried the weight of truth. Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to stop him, to tell him they should bury these feelings, but she couldn't deny them either. That night, Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She could still see the way Michael had looked at her, the softness in his eyes, the quiet pain in his voice. She thought of the kindness he had shown, the laughter he had brought back into her days, the simple joy of his company. The feelings inside her felt dangerous, but also alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. The following day, Michael returned with bags of groceries. "I thought I'd cook for us tonight," he said casually, as if nothing had happened the evening before. Emma hesitated at first, but let him in. Watching him move confidently in the kitchen, chopping, stirring, humming softly, made her chest ache with emotions she couldn't control. When he handed her a plate and smiled, she couldn't help but smile back. Even though part of her wanted to cry, dinner passed quickly, filled with easy conversation. But afterward, as they cleaned up together, Their hands brushed when they both reached for the same dish. Neither pulled away immediately. Emma's breath caught, and when she finally looked up, Michael's gaze was already on hers. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. She broke the moment by stepping back, forcing a laugh. But inside, she was trembling. Later, as they sat in the living room, Michael leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Emma," he began slowly, "I don't expect anything from you. I want you to know that what I feel isn't something I can ignore, but I'll respect you always." His words were steady, yet she could see the storm behind them. Emma's heart twisted. She admired his restraint, his respect, even while her own emotions threatened to spill over. She wanted to tell him she felt it too, that she hadn't felt this kind of connection in so long, but the words never came. Instead, she gave him a look filled with all the things she couldn't say out loud. And in that silent exchange, everything was understood. The evening ended quietly. Michael left with a polite smile, but Emma could see the sadness in his eyes. She closed the door slowly, leaning against it as tears finally escaped. She wasn't crying out of guilt alone. She was crying because part of her didn't want to let him go. In the days that followed, Emma tried to busy herself, but every corner of the house reminded her of Michael's presence, the repaired cabinet, the groceries in the fridge, the sound of his laughter still echoing faintly in her memory. She found herself replaying his words, his gaze, his smile. Each memory pulled at her heart, reminding her of the choice she would eventually have to make. Michael, too, kept his distance, visiting less often, though Emma could sense the unspoken tension in every interaction. It wasn't anger or regret, was longing held tightly in place by restraint, and though they both tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, the truth lingered between them, unshakable and undeniable. Emma knew the path ahead was unclear. She couldn't ignore her vows, nor could she dismiss the emotions that had taken root so suddenly, so powerfully. For now, all she could do was carry the weight of both the loyalty she owed and the longing she felt. And each time she thought of Michael's quiet confession, her heart whispered what her lips never dared to say. The final evening arrived sooner than Emma expected. Daniel was due home the next morning, and the quiet tension that had been building all week pressed heavier on her chest. She stood at the window, watching the fading light slip across the street, when she heard a gentle knock at the door. Her heart knew it was Michael before she even opened it. He stood there with a small suitcase at his side, his smile soft but not as bright as the first day. There was a sadness in his eyes, a weight that matched her own. Emma's throat tightened as she stepped back to let him in, though part of her wished she could freeze time. Keep him on that doorstep forever. Inside, the house felt different. The warmth of their laughter, the easy comfort they had shared, now seemed fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Michael placed the suitcase by the door and turned to face her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was full, carrying all the unspoken words they had been holding back. Finally, Michael broke it. "Emma," he said quietly, "I need to tell you this before I leave. These days with you, they've meant more to me than I can explain. But I can't stay. Not like this." His honesty cut through her. She wanted to stop him, to beg him not to go, but her lips refused to move. Instead, she felt tears sting her eyes. He stepped closer, not too close, just enough for her to see the conflict written across his face. "I respect you," he continued, his voice steady but full of feeling. "And I respect my brother. Whatever I feel, whatever you feel, it has to end here." Emma's heart ached. She wanted to argue, to tell him that what they shared was real, that it had awakened something inside her she hadn't felt in years. But at the same time, she knew he was right. She had made promises, vows that couldn't be undone by a fleeting moment. No matter how powerful it felt, she whispered, her voice trembling, "Michael, I don't want this to be the end." He shook his head gently, his eyes filled with sorrow. "It has to be. Because if we don't stop now, we'll regret it later. And I don't want to see you carry regret. I'd rather leave with the memory of what we shared, pure and untouched, than let it turn into something that breaks us both." The words hit her harder than she expected. Emma turned away, pressing her hand against her lips to keep the sob from escaping. Michael watched her, his own jaw tight as though he were holding back his own pain. After a long pause, she managed to face him again. Her tears fell freely now, but her voice steadied. "You've reminded me of something. I forgot that my heart is still alive. For that, I'll always be grateful." Michael's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment Emma thought he might reach out, hold her, say the words she longed to hear. But instead, he simply gave her a look that carried everything affection, restraint, longing, and farewell all at once. He picked up his suitcase and walked toward the door. Emma followed each step heavy, her heart pulling in two directions. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. "Take care of yourself, Emma. You deserve happiness even if it isn't with me." She nodded, unable to trust her voice. Her tears blurred his figure, but she memorized the outline of his face, the gentleness of his expression, the final gift of his smile. It was the same smile that had lit her morning at the doorstep. It's the same smile that had changed everything. Michael stepped into the night, his footsteps fading into the quiet street. Emma closed the door slowly, her hand lingering on the knob as though holding on to him for just a moment longer. The house was silent again, but it no longer felt like the same silence she had known before. This one was heavier, filled with the memory of what could never be. She leaned against the door, her body trembling as the tears finally escaped in full. It wasn't just sadness, it was release too. She knew she had felt something rare, something powerful, even if it was only for a short while. And though it hurt, she also knew it had reminded her of her own strength, her own capacity to feel deeply. That night, Emma lay awake in bed, staring into the darkness. Daniel would be home tomorrow, and life would return to its usual rhythm. She would greet him, listen to his stories, and carry on as she always had. But in her heart, she knew she had changed. She had discovered that love wasn't just about routine or promises, it was about being seen, being valued, being alive. Michael's departure left a hollow space inside her, but it also left a spark. She knew she would never forget his words, his kindness, or the way his smile had made her feel. It wasn't a love story that could be lived, but it was one that would always stay in her memory, etched like a secret chapter in her heart. As dawn began to touch the edges of the sky, Emma finally closed her eyes. She whispered to herself, "Some moments aren't meant to last. They're meant to remind us." And in the quiet of her room, she held on to that truth. She had let him go, but the memory of his smile would always remain a light she could carry, even in the silence.